There are moments in television history that are instantly memorable and are etched into the collective memory of millions of people alike. This was for the Britain's Got Talent show, March 24th, 2012. A nervous 17-year-old called Jonathan Antoine walked onto the station, his shoulders hunched and a terrible source of dread in his eyes. Sitting next to him was his singing partner, 16-year-old Charlotte Jaconelli. They were simply known as Jonathan and Charlotte and were a classical crossover act with no recognition and seemingly no future. And the performance certainly failed to please the panel of judges, especially the notoriously discriminating Simon Cowell. Jonathan was standing in a plain t-shirt and pants when Simon Cowell leaned in his microphone and muttered what would become a famous line. "Just when you thought it couldn't get any worse." Doubt flooded the atmosphere in the audience. Here was a young boy who had been ignored and underestimated his whole life, and suddenly he was facing a wall of judgment on a national stage. He carried the world upon his shoulders. Then the music began, and Jonathan opened his mouth and sang the first few lines of The Prayer. And in that instant, everything changed. Smirks of dismissal evaporated and were replaced with looks of utter, complete disbelief. Cowell's mouth quite literally dropped to the floor. Amanda Holden's eyes widened in disbelief. This restrained, unassuming kid produced a sound that wasn't just good, it was a force of nature. It was a tenor voice, rich in depth, strength, and emotional resonance, and it soared across the auditorium with the maturity and control of a seasoned virtuoso 3 times his age. Before the first verse ended, there was a spontaneous roar of ovation from the audience, and many were already on their feet during the performance. I wouldn't call it just a performance. It was a revelation. And eventually, the voice that had been silenced by insecurity was finally heard by the whole world. This was the story of a present that had been tucked away. What the cameras and the applauding audiences could not see, however, was the deep and agonizing journey that had led him to that stage, and the even more complicated road that lay ahead of him. A road that would lead to fame, heartache, and a discovery that would change his understanding of everything. To appreciate the importance of that 3-minute audition, one must take a journey that is far beyond the walls of the television studio and back to a childhood marked by constant violence. Jonathan Antoine was born on January 13, 1995, in Hainault, Essex, the son of John, a police inspector, and Tracy, a housewife. Jonathan Antoine's life has been one of pain from a very young age. He had been bullied since he was 4 years old. It wasn't the common schoolyard variety of meanness. It was a constant campaign of ridicule about his weight, his looks, and his sensitive temperament. The campaign was a soul killer. The assaults became increasingly brutal throughout the years and left a permanent scar on his psyche that will never fade. In a world that felt frightening and cruel, young Jonathan found comfort in 2 things: food, which became his comfort, and music, which became his sanctuary. Both of these were his shelter. He could escape misery through the melodies of opera, the soaring notes of classical arias, and find a sense of strength and purpose that was denied to him in his daily life. For he could do this, for he could escape the misery. When he was 11, he made a life-changing decision: to go to West Hatch High School in Chigwell. By good luck, he came upon a vocal instructor called Jenny Ewington, a lady who would save his life in the end. Where most people saw a broken, overweight child, Ewington saw the makings of a talent that only comes around once in a generation. She could sense that there was raw, untapped voice strength there, underneath the quiet exterior. The hard pieces she worked on with him were Where Is Love from Oliver. She took him in hand and brought him up. Jonathan's voice blossomed under her tutelage, and he was able to perform the sacred aria Panis Angelicus. The comments heard in the hallways of school began to change. He was no longer just the kid being bullied, but the boy with the incredible voice. By the age of 14, it was already clear that he was brilliant. He was offered a place in all 4 of London's main music conservatories, a testament to his outstanding talent, and the fact that he filed an audition for each of them. He decided to join the junior program at the prestigious Royal Academy of Music to refine his extraordinary talents. In 2010, he sang Bring Him Home from Les Miserables at the Stratford and East London Music Festival. His version of the song knocked the judges' socks off. In the long history of the event, they gave him the highest grade attainable, 98 out of 100. That was the highest score ever given. The next year, he found himself singing Ave Maria on the platform of London's Royal Festival Hall. Slowly, the frightened, disturbed youngster was giving way to a confident performer, a young man who is beginning to appreciate the size of his own gift. This foundation, built up over many years of sorrow but fortified by the refuge of music, would be the bedrock upon which his future, with all its ever-changing challenges and achievements, would be erected. It was not a road he walked to get to the finals of Britain's Got Talent. While attending West Hatch High School, he had formed a close friendship with Charlotte Jaconelli, who also served as his musical partner. Charlotte's positive reinforcement gave him the confidence to even consider performing a performance in front of an audience from all over the country. Together, they made preparations for the audition that would eventually change the course of their lives. Simon Cowell made a startling suggestion in the same breath, comparing Jonathan to the renowned Luciano Pavarotti following their breathtaking performance of The Prayer. The offer was unexpected. While he was being broadcast on national television, he recommended to Jonathan he should think about quitting Charlotte and continue his career as a solo artist. It was a tough assessment, and it was done with a business-like mentality, leaving the young couple in a very difficult position. But Jonathan would not break his commitment. In the semi-finals on May 7th, they sang Lucio Dalla's Caruso and got another standing ovation. They sang The Prayer again on May 12th with considerably more polish and emotional depth than they had shown before. They reached the final. Certainly, they were the finalists of the race. The crown seemed to belong to him in the eyes of the general public, the press, and even the judges. The narrative was told perfectly. The bullied underdog with the beautiful voice finds his place in the world. But in the world of reality TV, the best story doesn't always win. The winning act was a charming novelty act, Ashley and Pudsey, a girl and her dancing dog. It was a shocking upset because nobody expected it. Jonathan appeared on stage with a great smile on his face as confetti fell down on the winning duo. But within, he was feeling horrible failure. In a later remark, he described the experience as feeling as like his organs were sinking. He had come so far, only to fall at the final hurdle, after being defeated by a dog that did tricks. For many, this might have been the last chapter, but for Jonathan and Charlotte, this was just the prelude to an even greater victory. Simon Cowell's phone was ringing the day after the episode finished. The love from the public and Simon Cowell was obvious, and being the shrewd businessman that he is, he knew that second place may often be more valuable than first. The announcement came from Psycho, Simon Cowell's own record company, less than 24 hours after the broadcast disappointment on May 13, 2012. Jonathan and Charlotte had signed a shocking £1 million recording contract. They lost the battle, but won the war. They published their first studio album on the 24th of September 2012, aptly named Together. It was a commercial hit almost immediately, reaching to the 5th spot on the charts in the United Kingdom and selling over 250,000 copies alone. Critics praised Jonathan's voice, describing its sound as extremely silky and creamy. The CD had a mix of classical standards and emotive arias, with their famous performance of The Prayer as its centerpiece. The success was incredibly intoxicating. The two youngsters from Essex were suddenly internationally famous. They traveled through France and Italy. A show was commissioned by ITV, and documentary crews followed them everywhere they went across those countries. Simon Cowell, in an act of humility that was televised, even apologized on camera for his earlier suggestion that they should break up. It was a storybook come true. But even as their golden facade of prosperity shone brightly, cracks were beginning to develop in the foundations of their partnership. In addition, their second album, Perhaps Love, released on October 14, 2013, also reached the 5th position on the charts. Charlotte said it was a more varied offering that features interpretations of contemporary songs, such as Florence and the Machine's You Got the Love. Interestingly, the CD also contained solo recordings from both artists. It was a modest but undeniable evidence of the distinct artistic aims they had set themselves. The stress was really real, but no sound was made of it. While Charlotte was growing increasingly enamored with the story and style of performance of musical theater, Jonathan's commitment remained firmly in the domain of classical opera. They were two young musicians propelled into the stratosphere of fame and began to realize they wanted to go in different directions. And then, on February 2nd, 2014, the news finally broke that their loyal fan base, affectionately called the Fantwans, had been fearing. Jonathan and Charlotte were officially going their separate ways. They issued a thoughtful, positive statement, recognizing their remarkable transformation from high school pals to finalists on Big Brother and multi-platinum recording artists. In their statement, they said each had been offered solo album deals by Sony Classical. They spun the split as an exciting new chapter for each of them individually. On the other side, the story that was portrayed in the media was not as rosy, with some outlets saying that Charlotte was the one who broke off the relationship. A lot of fans were crushed. The couple, who had captured the hearts of people all around the country with their bond and shared dream, were no longer together. Jonathan's thoughts about the split were more open and honest after some time had gone by. He credited Charlotte with giving him the confidence to do Big Brother, given the fantastic thing they had done together. On the other hand, he added, neither of us had been ensemble artists, and we both loved solo performances, so it was the natural evolution of the thing. At the point where I had the necessary confidence and understood myself a bit more, I felt it was time to make the leap. In short, Simon Cowell's first, brutal observation had been prophetic. Jonathan was bound to be successful as a soloist. In the aftermath of the dissolution of the relationship, sadness was present. After the personal and unique encounter that the two friends shared together, they gradually grew apart. They didn't talk to each other a lot, Jonathan remarked in an interview, because the industry is so demanding. What had once been the closest of friends, working side by side to create a dream, were now, in all but name, two strangers. They were clearly just that, rumors. The continual claims of a romantic relationship between them, which were nurtured by the chemistry that they demonstrated on stage. Both of them have always maintained that they were just ever close friends, and Charlotte had even called Jonathan her brother. Now the most significant question looming was whether or not the guy with the golden voice could be successful on his own. Could the talent that had made him famous be enough to enable him to go on with his career without the companion who had been by his side? On October 13th, 2014, the answer came when Jonathan released his first solo album, Tenore. The pressure was on him like nobody's business, but it was a wonderful success. With this achievement, Jonathan became the youngest tenor in the history of the world to reach such a high achievement. The album instantly hit #1 on the classical artist album chart. It also did amazingly well on the mainstream pop chart in the United Kingdom, where it broke the top 15. All the reviews praised it unanimously. It was a record of his variety and emotional depth, and included a dramatic version of Panis Angelicus, the song which he had perfected with his first teacher. One reviewer, on the release of the album, said, "Here is a new star on the vocal scene," and his first solo album attests to his miraculous talent. Jonathan was personally invited by Plácido Domingo, widely regarded as one of the greatest tenors in the world's history, to appear as his guest at the 2014 iTunes Festival. This invitation is the final confirmation. It was not only symbolic of the passing of the torch, but it was also a sign of approval from the highest echelons of the ancient world. He proceeded to rise in the stratosphere, touring the United States and appearing at such high-profile events as Muhammad Ali's Celebrity Fight Night. His second solo album, Believe, released in August 2016, was a leap into the unknown. The CD included classical arias, a melancholy rendition of Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah, and inventive collaborations. His 2020 release, Going the Distance, was his most ambitious project to date, a concept album recorded with the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra. He said the album was inspired by Michelle Doucet, a Canadian waitress he met on the internet, who he called the light of my life. He made his American television debut with a concert filmed in Toronto and shown on the public broadcasting service. The record also features Jonathan's first ever performance of Nessun Dorma, the notoriously difficult aria from Puccini's Turandot. Jonathan didn't just sing it, he conquered it. His voice had matured over the years, gained new depths, new strength. Besides, he had proved beyond a reasonable doubt that he was not only one half of a duet, but a tremendous soloist in his own right. The youngster Simon Cowell had doubted was now a household name around the world, playing to sold-out stadiums and topping the charts. On the other side, Jonathan was fighting a host of severe personal issues that were kept under wraps, even though his shows were off the charts and he was getting raves from critics. Fame doesn't fix trauma. Jonathan Antoine's deep childhood wounds never healed long after he reached stardom. Around the time he made his first appearance on Big Brother, he was officially diagnosed with acute depression, a condition he has struggled with all his life. He's been really open about his experience with depression. His mental health had taken a real battering during the years he was being harassed, threatened, and made to feel useless. His illness deteriorated further because of the pressure that came with his newly discovered celebrity status, which culminated in a terrible episode that resulted in the cancellation of a major concert at the prestigious Royal Albert Hall. It was a harsh reminder that success could not silence the horrors of his past. He entered into a relationship at about 18, which was hard on him and made his difficulties harder. His fiancée at that time was suffering from serious mental health problems, including a tendency towards self-destructive conduct. Later, he would describe the frightening experience of being with someone who cut herself with pencil sharpener blades and who made no attempt to hide the pain she was feeling. That relationship was a huge emotional burden for an already struggling young man with his own despair. Through all of these difficulties, his family was his anchor. He managed to get by as he had a solid support structure in place with his father John, mother Tracy, and older sister Charlotte. They were the ones who came to his concerts and gave him the unconditional love he needed. Rather than suffer in silence, Jonathan decided to use his position for the greater good. A passionate mental health advocate, he spoke openly about his own struggles with depression in order to remove the stigma around the condition and give others the chance to feel less alone. It was by means of his artistic labor that he was able to channel his horrible recollections. He also wrote children's books alongside others, such as Jonathan and the Porcupine, which had a strong message about bullying. The young boy was an advocate for the helpless, having been a victim himself. At the start of 2022, just after his 27th birthday, Jonathan received a diagnosis that would change his perception of himself and his entire existence. He was diagnosed as being on the autism spectrum. In 2024, on the occasion of Autism Awareness Day, he decided to educate the public about this information and wrote on Instagram about the profound feeling of discovering this information. The recontextualization of a life that has already been lived is a frightening thing to reckon with, he said. It was as if all of the varied pieces of the puzzle that was his life suddenly fit into place. It accounted for the social awkwardness he always felt, the single-mindedness with which he attended to music, the sense that he was always a little bit behind the world around him. But the issue was not that he suffered from a mental disorder. His brain was just built differently altogether. The diagnosis was exhilarating and terrifying. It was useful to understand why the bullying that happened when I was a child had such a significant effect, and why relationships had always been so hard to deal with. Armed with his newfound self-awareness, a fantastic tool not only for his own well-being, but also for his advocacy, he was able to speak with even more authority on the importance of embracing neurodiversity. This reevaluation of self was taking place in the context of a dramatic change in the external world. Around 2018 or so, Jonathan decided to take control of his physical health. With a thyroid ailment that was under control and a fresh sense of commitment, he embarked on a trip that would make a huge impact in his weight loss. This change didn't come from fad diets or surgery, but from the persistent application of discipline. Since he began, he has seemingly only fallen short of his goal of walking 10,000 steps every single day. He has committed to walk this much every single day. He fundamentally changed his relationship with food and swapped his comfort eating for healthier, more mindful meal choices. The results were truly astounding. Over the next few years, Jonathan lost more than 70 pounds, with some estimates putting the total weight loss as high as 120 pounds. Photographs from 2024 indicated that the man had dropped a lot of weight. His face and body were totally different, but his curly hair was still there after the metamorphosis. He looked to be in better shape, stronger, more at peace with himself than the last time we saw him. It was not about being up to the industry requirements, but a personal milestone. The physical embodiment of the inner peace and self-acceptance he had fought so hard to acquire. The year 2024 ushers in what Jonathan Antoine refers to as a powerful new era, and he is presently living in it. But he still composes music that stretches the boundaries of the classical crossover genre. He showed that he can marry his classical background with modern pop music by recording a beautiful cover of John Legend's All of Me. The idea behind this music was to tease his future album, which is supposed to be titled Speaking to You. He has been sharing his excitement for this record with his loyal fan base on various social media sites. By the later half of 2024, he published his Christmas CD, Christmas Land, which was another big hit for him and helped him consolidate his position in the professional music industry. The fact that his net worth is projected to be a healthy $4 million is evidence of the fact that he continues to be successful. The sales of his albums, his performances, and his appearances on television have all contributed to his success. Charlotte Jaconelli, one of the other characters in his story, has successfully converted to a career in musical theater, obtaining roles in major West End musicals such as Sweet Charity and Heathers the Musical. Other characters in his story include. However, the two continue to be separated from one another. In the end, his relationship with Michelle Doucette, who was the source of inspiration for his album Believe, came to an end. Nonetheless, he has chosen to keep this information private. A documentary with the working title Beyond the High Sea is currently in the process of being produced, and it promises to provide even more in-depth insight into his life. A documentary that describes the story of his incredible adventure is shown here. A man who is talented in a variety of areas, Jonathan Antoine is also a vocalist. Not only is he a survivor, but he is also an advocate and a person who has successfully navigated the treacherous waters of celebrity, mental illness, and self-discovery in order to emerge on the other side more powerful and more genuine. The 17-year-old youngster who is performing on the Big Brother stage could only dream of being as comfortable and content as he is in his own skin. He appears to be at ease and content with himself. His narrative is not only about how he became a famous person, it is also about how he discovered who he is. A voyage that is not just a path of refusing to be broken by the brutality of the world, but also a massive monument to the resiliency of the human spirit, is what this journey is all about. From the depths of sadness to the clarity of a diagnosis that would change his life, Jonathan Antoine has not just survived, he has developed. He went from being a bullied youngster of 4 years old to becoming a viral hit. He went from the horrific public split to the victorious solo career. As a result of all the challenges he has faced, not only has his voice become more refined as a singer, but he has also become a more human being, and as a result, his art has been imbued with a depth of passion that can only come from a life that has been lived with genuine courage and honesty. It is a story of survival that is being recounted by the voice that once shook the world, and it is a story that absolutely must be heard.